What if some of the foods sitting in your kitchen right now, the ones you specifically chose because they seemed like the healthy option, are quietly raising your blood sugar more than the occasional treat you feel guilty about? Most people over 50 have become fairly good at spotting the obvious culprits. Soda, candy, white bread, fried foods. These are easy to identify and easy to moderate. But there is a specific category of foods that carry a genuinely healthy reputation, foods recommended in countless articles and even by well-meaning family members, that can quietly produce a bigger blood sugar spike than people expect, particularly after 50, when insulin sensitivity naturally shifts and blood sugar regulation becomes a little less forgiving than it once was. So today we're going to walk through 5 specific foods with a healthy reputation that can secretly raise your blood sugar more than you'd expect, exactly why each one behaves this way inside your body, and how to enjoy them in a way that works with your blood sugar rather than against it. Before we begin, remember this video is for education only. If you have diabetes, prediabetes, or are managing blood sugar concerns with medication, please speak with your doctor or a registered dietitian about how these specific foods fit into your individual plan. Now let's begin. Most people ask, which foods raise blood sugar? But that's actually an incomplete question because it assumes blood sugar impact is simply a matter of a food being labeled healthy or unhealthy. The better question is, what specific properties of a food, beyond just its general reputation, actually determine how quickly and how much it raises blood sugar? Because a food's overall nutritional value and its specific effect on your blood sugar are related, but they are not the same thing, and many genuinely nutritious foods can still produce a significant blood sugar response depending on their carbohydrate structure, their preparation, their portion size, and what they're eaten alongside. Here is why this distinction matters so much more after 50 specifically. Insulin sensitivity, meaning how efficiently your body cells respond to insulin and move sugar out of your bloodstream, naturally tends to decline somewhat with age, a gradual shift influenced by hormonal changes, reduced muscle mass, and typically somewhat reduced physical activity compared to earlier decades of life. This means the same food that produced a modest, easily managed blood sugar rise at 30 may produce a more pronounced, longer-lasting spike at 50 or 60, even without any change to the food itself, simply because your body's underlying insulin response has shifted. Additionally, many adults over 50 are managing prediabetes without even realizing it, since this condition frequently produces no obvious symptoms, meaning blood sugar spikes may already be happening more significantly than expected, well before an official diagnosis brings this pattern to anyone's attention. Think of your blood sugar system like a warehouse loading dock managing incoming deliveries. A well-functioning, efficient loading dock can handle a large truck arriving with a big shipment, quickly unloading and distributing that shipment to where it needs to go without much delay or backup. But a loading dock with fewer available workers, representing reduced insulin sensitivity, struggles more with that same large shipment, leading to a backup of goods sitting on the dock for longer than ideal, representing sugar remaining elevated in your bloodstream for a longer period than would happen with a more efficient system. The size and speed of the incoming shipment, meaning how much sugar enters your bloodstream and how quickly, matters just as much as how efficiently your particular loading dock happens to be running that day. Let's start with the first food on our list, dried fruit. Many people over 50 specifically choose dried fruit, such as raisins, dried cranberries, or dried mango, believing it to be a naturally healthy, whole food alternative to candy or other processed sweets. And in some respects, dried fruit does retain certain nutrients from the original fruit, including some fiber and various vitamins and minerals. However, the drying process removes water content while concentrating the natural sugars into a much smaller volume, meaning a small handful of dried fruit often contains a considerably larger amount of sugar than the equivalent amount of the same fruit in its fresh form. For example, a small box of raisins can contain an amount of sugar roughly comparable to a much larger portion of fresh grapes, simply because the water has been removed and the sugar concentrated. Additionally, many commercial dried fruit products include added sugar during processing, further increasing the sugar content beyond what naturally occurs in the fruit itself. This concentrated sugar, combined with the fact that dried fruit is often eaten in larger quantities than people would realistically eat of the fresh version, since it's easy to snack on a large handful without the same sense of fullness that fresh fruit provides, can produce a more significant blood sugar spike than most people expect from something labeled and perceived as a healthy snack. The fix involves treating dried fruit as a more concentrated source of sugar than fresh fruit, measuring portions more carefully, perhaps a small handful rather than an open-ended snack, and pairing it with a source of protein or healthy fat, such as a few nuts, to help moderate the speed of sugar absorption. The second food on our list is white potatoes, particularly when prepared in certain common ways, such as mashed potatoes or baked potatoes without the skin. Potatoes carry a generally healthy reputation as a whole, unprocessed vegetable, and they do provide genuine nutritional value, including potassium and vitamin C. However, potatoes rank notably high on what's called the glycemic index, a measure of how quickly a food raises blood sugar compared to pure glucose, particularly when the potato is mashed or its texture is otherwise broken down significantly during preparation. This happens because mashing or extensively processing the potato's starch structure makes it considerably easier and faster for your digestive system to break down into sugar, compared to eating the potato in a less processed form, such as a whole roasted potato with the skin intact, where the fiber in the skin and the less broken down starch structure slow digestion and sugar absorption somewhat. This means the exact same potato can produce meaningfully different blood sugar responses depending entirely on how it's prepared, a distinction many people never consider when categorizing potatoes as simply healthy or unhealthy. The fix involves favoring preparation methods that keep the potato's structure more intact, such as leaving the skin on and avoiding extensive mashing, and pairing potatoes with protein, fiber-rich vegetables, or healthy fats within the same meal to help moderate the overall blood sugar response of that meal. The third food on our list is smoothies, particularly fruit-based smoothies that many people consider one of the healthiest options available for breakfast or a snack. Smoothies often combine multiple servings of fruit into a single beverage, sometimes alongside fruit juice or other sweetened liquids as a base, meaning a single smoothie can easily contain the sugar equivalent of several pieces of whole fruit consumed all at once, in liquid form. This matters considerably because blending fruit breaks down much of its fiber structure mechanically, and consuming that sugar in liquid form without the need for chewing or the same digestive breakdown process required by whole, solid fruit allows that sugar to enter your bloodstream considerably faster than eating the same fruit in its whole form would. This combination of concentrated sugar from multiple servings of fruit and the faster absorption associated with a blended, liquid format means many seemingly healthy smoothies can produce a blood sugar spike more comparable to a sugary beverage than most people would expect from something built entirely around fruit. The fix involves being mindful of how many servings of fruit are actually combined into a single smoothie, favoring smoothies built around vegetables like spinach or cucumber with only 1 or 2 servings of fruit for sweetness, and including a source of protein such as plain yogurt or a scoop of protein powder and healthy fat such as a small amount of nut butter or avocado, to slow the absorption of the sugar that is present. The fourth food on our list is granola and granola bars, products frequently marketed and perceived as a wholesome, health-conscious choice, often featuring oats, nuts, and dried fruit prominently on their packaging. While the individual ingredients in granola, oats and nuts specifically, do carry genuine nutritional value on their own, many commercial granola products include a significant amount of added sugar, often in the form of honey, brown sugar, or syrup, used both for flavor and to help bind the ingredients together into clusters or bars. This added sugar, combined with the fact that granola is often consumed in larger portions than people realize, since it's easy to pour a generous serving over yogurt or into a bowl without carefully measuring, means many granola products contain considerably more sugar per serving than their health-conscious packaging and reputation would suggest. This mismatch between perceived healthiness and actual sugar content is one of the more common blind spots people encounter when trying to manage their overall sugar intake. The fix involves checking the actual nutrition label rather than relying on the marketing on the front of the package, looking specifically at the grams of added sugar per serving, and either choosing a lower sugar granola option or measuring your portion carefully rather than pouring an open-ended amount, ideally pairing it with a source of protein such as plain yogurt, rather than a sweetened yogurt that adds even more sugar on top. Now let's talk about the fifth and final food on our list, and this one often surprises people the most: fruit juice, including 100% fruit juice without any added sugar. Many people specifically choose fruit juice believing that because it's simply juice pressed from real fruit, without any added sweeteners, it must be a genuinely healthy beverage choice, particularly compared to soda or other clearly sweetened drinks. However, the process of juicing fruit removes nearly all of the fiber that would otherwise be present if you ate the same fruit whole, concentrating the natural sugar into a liquid form that, similar to the smoothie discussion earlier, allows for considerably faster sugar absorption than eating whole fruit would produce. Additionally, it typically takes several whole pieces of fruit to produce a single glass of juice, meaning that glass often contains a sugar load equivalent to eating multiple pieces of fruit in one sitting, something most people would never actually do if eating the fruit whole, simply due to the fullness and effort involved in consuming that much whole fruit at once. This combination of concentrated sugar and rapid liquid absorption means 100% fruit juice can produce a blood sugar response quite similar to a sugar-sweetened beverage, despite carrying a considerably healthier public reputation and containing genuine vitamins that soda lacks. The fix involves treating fruit juice as an occasional choice rather than a daily staple, favoring whole fruit as your primary source of fruit intake specifically because the intact fiber slows sugar absorption and naturally limits portion size, and if you do enjoy juice occasionally, considering a smaller portion, perhaps diluted with water, rather than a full glass. Now, before we go further, let's debunk a few common myths about healthy foods and blood sugar specifically. For years, many people believe that if a food is unprocessed, natural, or derived directly from fruit or vegetables, it cannot meaningfully raise blood sugar the way processed or sugary foods do. Some believe that a food's general health halo, meaning its overall reputation and the other nutrients it provides, automatically means its blood sugar impact is minimal or irrelevant. Some believe that portion size doesn't matter much for foods considered healthy, since the food itself is assumed to be beneficial regardless of quantity. And some believed that liquid and solid forms of the same food behave identically inside the body simply because they share the same origin. But when we look at the actual mechanisms involved, particularly glycemic index, fiber content, preparation method, and portion size, the picture becomes considerably more nuanced than a simple healthy versus unhealthy framework. The real questions are not simply, is this food natural or does it have a healthy reputation? The better questions are, how has this food been processed or prepared, and has that processing removed fiber or concentrated its natural sugar? Am I consuming it in a portion comparable to what I'd realistically eat in its whole, unprocessed form? And am I eating it alongside protein or healthy fat that can help moderate the speed of sugar absorption? A food's genuine nutritional value and its specific blood sugar impact are related but distinct considerations, and understanding both matters considerably more after 50, when your body's insulin response has less margin for error than it once did. Now let's build a simple, practical framework for enjoying these 5 foods in a way that works better with your blood sugar after 50. For dried fruit, measure a small, specific portion rather than snacking freely, and pair it with a handful of nuts or another protein source. For potatoes, favor preparations that keep the potato's structure more intact, such as a roasted potato with the skin on, rather than heavily mashed versions, and include protein and fiber-rich vegetables within the same meal. For smoothies, build them around vegetables with only 1 or 2 servings of fruit, and include a protein source like plain yogurt along with a source of healthy fat. For granola, check the actual nutrition label for added sugar content, measure your portion carefully rather than pouring freely, and pair it with plain, unsweetened yogurt rather than a sweetened variety. For fruit juice, treat it as an occasional choice rather than a daily habit. Favor whole fruit as your primary source of fruit intake, and if you do have juice, consider a smaller, perhaps diluted portion rather than a full glass. Let's talk a bit more about the role of fiber specifically, since it's the common thread running through several of the foods discussed today. Fiber slows the rate at which sugar is absorbed into your bloodstream, essentially smoothing out what would otherwise be a sharper, faster blood sugar spike into a more gradual, manageable rise. This is precisely why removing fiber, whether through juicing, extensive mashing, or blending, tends to increase a food's blood sugar impact even when the underlying sugar content remains similar to its whole food form. Understanding this principle, that processing which removes or breaks down fiber tends to increase blood sugar impact, gives you a genuinely useful, transferable framework that extends well beyond just these 5 specific foods, helping you evaluate other foods you encounter with a similar lens, rather than needing to memorize an ever-growing list of specific exceptions to a simple healthy versus unhealthy framework. It's also worth discussing food pairing as a broader strategy, since this principle applies not just to the 5 foods discussed today but to your overall approach to eating after 50. Consuming a carbohydrate-containing food alongside a source of protein, healthy fat, or additional fiber consistently produces a more moderate, gradual blood sugar response compared to eating that same carbohydrate on its own, since protein and fat both slow gastric emptying and the overall rate of digestion, giving your body more time to manage the incoming sugar without producing as sharp a spike. This is a genuinely practical strategy you can apply to nearly any meal or snack, not just the 5 specific foods highlighted in today's discussion. Simply by asking yourself whether a given carbohydrate-containing food is being eaten in isolation or alongside something that can help moderate its absorption. Let's talk briefly about the role of movement after eating, since this is a genuinely powerful, simple strategy that applies to all 5 foods discussed today, not just one specific item on the list. A short walk, even just 10 to 15 minutes, taken within an hour or so after a meal or snack containing any of these 5 foods, helps your muscles take up glucose from your bloodstream more efficiently, essentially providing an additional pathway for managing that incoming sugar beyond relying on insulin alone. This effect has been observed consistently in research on post-meal walking, showing meaningfully reduced blood sugar spikes compared to remaining sedentary after eating the same meal. This doesn't mean movement eliminates the need for the food-specific adjustments already discussed, but it does provide an additional, complementary tool, particularly useful on occasions when you do choose to enjoy a smoothie, a glass of juice, or a larger portion of one of these foods without all the moderating adjustments in place. It's also worth briefly mentioning a common honorable mention that deserves at least passing acknowledgement. Sweeteners marketed as natural alternatives to refined sugar, such as honey or agave nectar, often added to foods specifically because they carry a more natural, wholesome perception compared to white sugar. While these do contain some trace nutrients that refined sugar lacks, they behave quite similarly to refined sugar once inside your bloodstream, producing a comparable blood sugar response despite their more natural marketing and reputation. If you've been specifically choosing granola, yogurt, or other foods sweetened with honey or agave under the assumption that this makes them meaningfully gentler on your blood sugar compared to versions sweetened with regular sugar, this is worth reconsidering, since the practical difference in blood sugar impact tends to be considerably smaller than the difference in perceived healthiness between these sweeteners. Let's also touch on reading nutrition labels more broadly, since this skill extends well beyond the 5 specific foods discussed today and applies to virtually any packaged food you're evaluating for its blood sugar impact. Beyond simply checking the total grams of sugar, looking specifically at the grams of fiber per serving gives you a more complete picture, since a food with a similar sugar content but considerably more fiber will generally produce a gentler, more gradual blood sugar response than a food with minimal fiber to help slow that sugar's absorption. Some nutrition labels also now separately list added sugars apart from naturally occurring sugars, a distinction worth paying attention to specifically for foods like plain yogurt with fruit mixed in, or granola, where naturally occurring sugar from the fruit itself is different from additional sugar added during processing purely for sweetness, and have no specific reason to closely monitor their blood sugar. For adults without these specific concerns, occasional consumption of any of the 5 foods discussed today, even without the modifications suggested, is unlikely to cause meaningful harm, and the goal of today's video is not to suggest these foods must be eliminated entirely or treated with alarm. Rather, the goal is to help you recognize that a food's healthy reputation doesn't automatically mean unlimited portions are equally appropriate for everyone, particularly as insulin sensitivity naturally shifts with age, and to provide practical, simple adjustments for anyone who does want to be more mindful of their blood sugar patterns, whether due to a specific diagnosis, a family history of diabetes, or simply general awareness as they move through their 50s, 60s, and beyond. And what about people who have already been told by their doctor that they have prediabetes or early blood sugar concerns, and are looking for more specific, individualized guidance beyond what a general video can offer? A registered dietitian who specializes in blood sugar management can provide considerably more personalized guidance, including how these 5 foods specifically fit into your individual meal patterns, your current medications if any, and your particular blood sugar goals, information that goes well beyond what any general overview, including this one, is able to provide for your specific situation. Let's also briefly mention the value of a home blood glucose monitor, or a continuous glucose monitor if your doctor has recommended one, as a genuinely useful tool for understanding exactly how your own body responds to these specific foods, since individual responses can vary meaningfully from person to person, even among people with similar overall health profiles. If you're curious how a smoothie, a serving of granola, or a small glass of juice specifically affects your own blood sugar, checking your levels before and roughly 1 to 2 hours after eating that particular food can provide personalized, concrete information about your individual response, rather than relying entirely on general population-level research that may not perfectly reflect your own body's specific pattern. Now let's summarize everything in a simple way. 5 foods carrying a healthy reputation that can secretly raise blood sugar more than expected after 50 include dried fruit, due to its concentrated sugar and easy overconsumption; potatoes, particularly when mashed or otherwise processed in ways that break down their natural structure; smoothies, especially fruit-heavy versions that combine multiple servings of fruit in a fiber-depleted, liquid form; granola and granola bars, which often contain more added sugar than their marketing and reputation suggest; and 100% fruit juice, which concentrates the sugar from multiple pieces of fruit while removing the fiber that would otherwise slow its absorption. In each case, the underlying issue isn't that these foods are inherently unhealthy or should be avoided entirely, but rather that their preparation, processing, or typical portion size can produce a blood sugar response considerably different from what their healthy reputation alone would suggest, particularly relevant after 50, when insulin sensitivity has less margin for error than it did in earlier decades. But remember, none of this means you need to eliminate these 5 foods from your life entirely or approach them with anxiety every time they appear on your plate. The goal is simply informed awareness, understanding the specific factors, fiber content, preparation method, and portion size that determine a food's actual blood sugar impact, so you can make thoughtful choices about how and how much you enjoy these foods, rather than assuming a healthy reputation alone guarantees a gentle blood sugar response. So today, or at your next opportunity to enjoy one of these 5 foods, try just one small adjustment. Measure your portion of dried fruit or granola rather than eating freely from the container. Choose a roasted potato with the skin on rather than a heavily mashed version. Add a scoop of plain yogurt to your next smoothie. Small, informed adjustments like these can help you continue enjoying foods you genuinely like while supporting steadier, more manageable blood sugar patterns over time. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 foods surprised you the most? And did you already suspect any of them before watching this video? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else watching reconsider a food they've long assumed was an entirely safe, healthy choice. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe to Nutri, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more simple, practical health strategies for adults over 50. And next, watch our video on why most people over 50 have been brushing their teeth the wrong way, because small, overlooked details, whether in your diet or your daily routine, quietly shape your long-term health far more than most people ever realize.